Elise Riker stepped off the transport like a diplomat, but moved like a predator in disguise. The thick silence of the Concorde's central plaza broken only by the murmur of curiosity. The Galactic Concorde, a coalition of over 900 species, layered in ceremony, hierarchy, and arrogance, had summoned Earth's representative to determine its potential value to the galactic fold. She arrived without an escort, without a translator, without even a visible weapon. Just a scuffed thermos clipped to her belt, and a smile too calm for someone standing at the mercy of 1,000 civilizations. The Concorde's overprime hall loomed around her, an impossible lattice of anti-grav spires and shimmering vaults engineered to overwhelm and intimidate. It didn't work. Elise adjusted the cuffs of her jacket and met every gaze with studied boredom. High Chancellor Zier, a telepathic octopoid with a crown of sensory quills, floated down on a personal lift and addressed her without preamble. Earth has no noble houses, no warp-born ancestors, no history of contribution. What makes you think you belong here? Elise's smile deepened. That's the wrong question. What makes you think we want to belong? That ripple of unease was her first victory. The council chamber, traditionally sterile and precise, became a simmering pot of indignation and intrigue. The delegate from the Traz Dominion, a 4-meter wall of chitin and teeth named General Korg, rumbled his discontent. Let her prove it in the trial of worth, he challenged, claws tapping. Elise didn't blink. 6 combatants. Your best. I'll use whatever's lying around. Her confidence bordered on suicidal, and that was the bait. The trial dome was a spectacle designed to reinforce galactic superiority, where precision fighters honed over centuries demonstrated dominance. Through form and power, Elise fought with nothing but stolen components, taunts, and timing. Against a gravity shifter, she scattered magnetic filings and watched his own gear betray him. Against a psychic duelist, she recited Earth nursery rhymes out of sync, derailing his mental patterns. Against a liquid-form predator, she electrified the arena floor using a coin and an exposed conduit. Each fight wasn't just a win, it was a dismantling of everything they assumed power should look like. By the 6th bout, half the spectators weren't cheering, they were calculating. Behind the observation glass, unseen to most, a lone figure watched in silence. He didn't wear insignia or speak aloud, but Elise knew he was there. Earth's unnamed agent, intel, shadow diplomacy, and long-term observer. His job was never to intervene, only to track system vulnerabilities, to map every gate, every relay, every flaw in the Concorde's networked soul. Earth had been studying them for decades, long before the first official contact. When Elise emerged, from the arena victorious, bloody but unbowed, the council chamber plunged into deliberations. But the true conversation happened off-record, behind the doors of Blackbird Station's encrypted hololink. Phase 1 complete, Elise said, sipping from her thermos. They still think we want a seat at their table. The agent's face remained expressionless. The Traz fleet has mobilized. Korg's flagship is en route to Overprime. They expect a retaliation demonstration. Elise nodded, a glint in her eye. Then we'll give them precision. What no one outside Earth knew was that while the Concorde debated process and honor, Earth had already slipped code into their diplomatic relays, infected their economic simulations with quantum uncertainty, and laced their AI translation matrices with chaos algorithms. The humans weren't just visitors, they were a systemic infection. But not one meant to kill. Not yet. The strategy wasn't destruction, it was exposure. They would show the galaxy what fear looked like when it wore a smile and carried no visible weapon. And Elise was the first crack in the cathedral. The Concorde thought they'd summoned a petitioner. Instead, they'd invited a test. The Traz Dominion's warship, Fang of Purpose, dropped out of slipspace above Overprime with the subtlety of a dropped anvil, blotting out stars as it positioned itself over the Concorde's core world in a deliberately Hostile orbit. The vessel's aggressive silhouette radiated a singular message: compliance through intimidation. General Korg stood on its bridge, fists clenched behind his back, mandibles twitching in anticipation. "They must see the price of insolence," he growled to his crew. In the council chamber below, Elise stood before the delegates, seemingly unshaken by the battleship now casting a shadow across the capital. "You invited Earth," she said evenly, voice carrying just enough defiance to provoke without inciting. "Did you expect us to come without teeth?" She placed her thermos on the central console and tapped its side twice. Instantly, the display behind her flared to life with a galactic map. Lines of code flickered across the systems, data trails, resource movements, fleet deployments, all marked with Earth's encrypted watermark. "You're being watched," she said, "and have been for years. Every protocol you've shared, every weapon test you've conducted, every negotiation tactic, you've given us the playbook." The chamber erupted in uproar, some demanding her arrest, others urging caution. General Korg broke in via hololink, projecting his massive image across the council chamber. "This is sabotage," he bellowed. "She admits to infiltration. Her species must be declared hostile." Elise didn't flinch. "You want hostile?" she said, tone sharpening. "Then look outside." The chamber lights dimmed as emergency protocols kicked in. Orbitals were shifting, not just the Traz warship, but others. Stealth signatures bloomed into view one by one, surrounding the fang. Of purpose. Ships of Earth design, sleek, asymmetric, ugly to conquered aesthetics, but with power signatures that didn't match any known calibration. They weren't just ships, they were proof of quiet preparation. 1,000 variables accounted. For 1,000 simulations run, the Blackbird-class fleet had no official existence. But here it was, poised to disable a galactic superpower's flagship without firing a single shot. "Stand down," Elise said directly to Korg, "or we'll shut your engines, lock your targeting arrays, and leave you drifting like a parade balloon." Her voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. Korg, enraged, gave the order to target the nearest Earth vessel, just as every system aboard his own ship went dark. On the Concorde's shared channel, Earth transmitted a live feed. Internal footage of Fang of Purpose's bridge frozen, alarms muted, power seeping away like air through a pinhole. Elise turned back to the council. "This isn't a war," she said. "It's a lesson." Around her, the delegates stared in mute horror, not at the damage, but at the elegance of it. Earth hadn't needed to destroy anything. It had only needed to demonstrate control. The unnamed Earth agent, still unseen to all but Elise, sent confirmation from the Shadow Network. Earth's override of Dominion command systems had reached 96% efficiency. The message was clear. Earth's power wasn't based on numbers, but on leverage, adaptability, and anticipation. The Concorde had spent centuries perfecting rituals of strength. Earth had spent decades studying how to render them meaningless. With the fleet in lockdown and the Traz warship neutered, Elise gave the final nudge. "Earth doesn't want a seat. We want a mirror held up to this empire of dust, and we want to see who flinches first." She picked up her thermos again and walked out of the chamber without being dismissed. Behind her, the galaxy's most entrenched alliance realized they had underestimated not just Earth, but the very idea of what power could look like when wielded by a species that thrived in chaos and never played by the rules. Elise returned to Blackbird Station in low orbit, where Earth's presence remained officially unacknowledged, but increasingly undeniable. The station, camouflaged against the debris field of an ancient satellite ring, was a hub of quiet brilliance, part command center, part psychological operations lab, part cultural black site. Inside, its corridors hummed with engineers running passive network intrusions, analysts interpreting emotional micro-reactions of Concorde delegates, and diplomats trained more in subtext than treaties. Elise walked straight to the debrief chamber, where the unnamed Earth agent stood in front of a multi-layered projection of galactic power flows. his expression unreadable. "The Concord is fragmenting," he said without turning. 3 sectors have initiated internal code audits. 1 is purging their AI cores. They don't know what's infected and what's just old code. Elise leaned on the edge of the console, sipping her cooling coffee. "Good. Paranoia is more infectious than logic." Below them, the image of General Korg's warship still floated, completely functional again, but under silent surveillance, its own command subroutines now mirrored to Blackbird. "They want to retaliate," the agent said, "but no one wants to be first." Elise smirked. "Because being first means being dissected in front of the others." Earth's true genius wasn't overwhelming force, it was forcing enemies to make the first mistake, to reveal themselves, to act rashly in the face of surgical restraint. In the days that followed, subtle chaos rippled through the conquered. Trade routes were rerouted, paranoid accusations erupted in diplomatic channels, and a dozen internal intelligence agencies began cross-investigating each other. The belief that Earth might be in control was more destabilizing than an actual declaration of war. Elise, meanwhile, became an icon of contradiction, officially a minor ambassador, but now invited to private negotiations, cultural summits, and, most importantly, off-record discussions with sectors previously closed to humanity. In one such meeting on the floating capital of the Enlai Consensus, Elise sat across from the psychic triumvirate, 3 identical-looking beings linked by a neural bond that hadn't been breached in 500 years. Until now. "We felt your words echo through us," one of them whispered. "You confuse reality with intent." Elise simply nodded. "That's the problem with consensus. You're vulnerable to disruption you don't agree with until it's already inside." She placed a small cube on the table, an innocuous device running a simulation of Concord history, rewritten by human prediction algorithms. In every version, the Concord fell, not through war, through stagnation, through blind adherence to tradition. The Enlai, shaken, asked her what Earth offered in return for such dangerous insight. Elise smiled, not kindly. A new kind of chaos, controlled, shared, profitable. Behind the smile, her mind ticked through contingency layers. Earth wasn't building an empire. It was seeding dependency. The more these empires adopted Earth's tools, Earth's models, Earth's unpredictable brilliance, the more influence it gained without planting a flag. Back on Blackbird, a new priority was underway: cultural infiltration. Subtle insertions of Earth media, humor, fashion, and idioms into conquered entertainment channels. Elise herself became the face of it in some circles, a strange icon of irreverent power, mocked by some, mythologized by others. The agent informed her that Earth memes were now circulating in 36 systems under code-neutral anonymizers. It was absurd. It was genius. The very weapon that made Earth dangerous wasn't its fleet or tech. It was the idea that they didn't want domination. They wanted everyone to see that the old way was dead and laugh at it. In private, Elise stood on a viewing deck, looking out at the endless arc of stars and the growing influence lines Earth was tracing like spider silk through galactic society. "They still think we want to win," she whispered to herself. "But all we ever needed was for them to play our game." The final phase was approaching, and the Concord had no idea it had already lost. The final act began not with weapons fire, but with silence, deliberate, strategic silence. Earth stopped responding to Concord transmissions. Elise disappeared from all public channels. Blackbird Station went dark. Trade protocols rerouted themselves through artificial dead zones, and the networked fabric of the Concord's central AI lattice began to glitch in ways that couldn't be replicated or predicted. Delegates panicked. A dozen crisis councils were formed in parallel, each convinced Earth was preparing for total war, each too afraid to move first. On the bridge of the Fang of Purpose, now ironically relegated to defense posture, General Korg stood surrounded by screens flickering with uncertain data, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Why would they vanish now?" he muttered. The answer came in the form of a broadcast, simple, low bandwidth, and projected simultaneously across every Concord system. Elise appeared on the screen, alone in a nondescript room, seated with one leg crossed over the other, thermos in hand, wearing a weathered leather jacket with no insignia. Her expression was calm, not triumphant. "You assumed we were seeking power," she said softly. "You assumed we wanted conquest, revenge, glory. You assumed because that's what you would have wanted in our place." The feed began overlaying data, unobtrusive, surgical, undeniable. Economic models with minor Earth tweaks that collapsed conquered sectors into Earth-led dependency. Military simulations showing how Earth's stealth satellites had been repurposing Concord defense grids into blind zones for months, cultural charts tracking the adoption of Earth phrases, sarcasm, and even advertising slogans across 50 species. "We didn't come to take your throne," Elise continued. "We came to show you that you never owned it in the first place, that your strength was an illusion, maintained by tradition, fear, and inertia. We are not conquerors. We are architects of collapse." The feed shifted to live footage of various Concord systems, ships frozen mid-flight by override commands, council archives recompiled into contradictory histories by Earth's adaptive logic viruses, even psychic relay stations. Temporarily hijacked to broadcast fragments of Earth poetry, chaos wrapped in calm, Elise stood up in the video and walked slowly toward the camera. "There is no war coming, because there is no one left to fight. You are not being invaded. You are being redefined." Then the feed cut out, leaving a galaxy reeling. Panic bloomed in the power vacuum, but Earth's hand never followed through with destruction. There were no fleets, no ground invasions, no planetary sieges, just continued silence. And that silence screamed louder than any threat. When communication from Blackbird resumed 2 weeks later, it came with a gift: open-source tools designed to help stabilize sectors now reliant on Earth infrastructure. A peace offering, labeled plainly, Version 1.0, Concord Rebuild, Earth Advisory Only. There were no demands attached. Earth had already won. In the council chamber, what remained of the ruling body gathered in uneasy unity to draft a formal acknowledgement of Earth's advisory seat, not a ruling one, not a conquered one, but one that held the weight of quiet supremacy. Elise returned, weeks later, unarmed, unescorted, sipping coffee as always, and was met not with resistance but deference. She took her seat, leaned back, and surveyed the new order she had created not with fire, but with foresight. The unnamed Earth agent, still buried in the networks of half a galaxy, sent a single line of confirmation. All nodes stable. No retaliation expected. Elise replied with a smirk and a single phrase: "Of course not. They still think it's peace." And as stars turned in indifferent silence, Earth took its place, not above the galaxy, not beneath it, but quietly, in all the spaces between where power truly lived.